Usually when we unpack the resume of a high-level strategic consultant or an entrepreneur who's scaling some multi-million-dollar business, the origin story is, well, it's pretty predictable.
Oh, yeah. You expect an Ivy League MBA or maybe a stint at a Silicon Valley incubator?
Right. Or someone who spent a decade climbing the corporate ladder at a Big Four firm. It's safe. It's insulated. It all happens in, boardrooms.
Boardrooms, spreadsheets, very controlled environments. You definitely don't usually see 20 years surviving knife fights in the hospitality underworld on a corporate LinkedIn profile.
No, you really don't. Which is exactly why today's deep dive is just so completely wild. We're looking at a man who describes himself as a small-town Aussie.
Mark Tulloch.
Yeah, Mark Tulloch. He spent 2 decades as a literal fist-throwing enforcer in the violent, chaotic underbelly of London's pub scene. But then he pivots.
A massive pivot.
Massive. He goes on to write 3 books. He releases 2 full R&B albums. And as if that isn't enough, he takes over a failing sports bar in Bali and multiplies its revenue by 3.63 times in just over a year.
It honestly sounds like someone stitched 3 different lives together into one person.
It really does.
Yeah.
But we have the documentation right in front of us, and it is incredibly precise. We're dissecting his exact operational and psychological blueprint.
Right, because what we're really looking at today is how someone takes raw, gritty human resilience, completely deconstructs it, and then pairs it with cutting-edge artificial intelligence to create this extreme level of output.
And we have a fascinating stack of sources to guide us through this. We are combing through clinical analytical reports on his specific coaching methodology, which he calls conscious systems.
We also have his highly detailed 90-day AI content calendar, which is fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Plus back-end financial dashboards, music streaming data from TuneCore, and some really granular business infographics. The mission today for you listening is to figure out the mechanisms here. How does a guy go from throwing punches in Covent Garden to running an automated business empire in Bali in just 18 minutes a day?
Well, to understand the highly disciplined system he built in Bali, you actually have to start by looking at the psychological crucible that forced him to build it in the first place.
Right.
This entire empire was born out of a total breaking point. Mark originally hails from Narooma, New South Wales. For those unfamiliar, it's a small, relatively isolated coastal town in Australia.
Yeah, and reading through the biographical sources, Narooma is described as an environment where physical resilience and emotional suppression weren't just cultural quirks. They were literal survival tools.
Exactly. The social hierarchy was ruthless.
If you showed vulnerability as a young man there, you got flattened.
And that kind of environment heavily conditions a developing brain. It primed him perfectly for what happened in his early 20s when he moves to London,
Where he ends up managing some of the most volatile, high-risk pubs in the heart of Covent Garden.
We are talking about over 2 decades of operating with zero formal security infrastructure. He was the sole enforcer.
Which is just insane to think about.
It really is. If there were brawlers, if there were substance abusers, or if organized hooligans came through the doors, he handled it. His operational manual was basically a code built from concrete and consequence.
He's doing all of this while hiding a massive variable, which is the twist that really makes this whole story click into place.
Yeah.
For those 20-plus years in London, he was operating with undiagnosed bipolar type 1.
This is the crucial piece of the puzzle. I mean, think about a standard corporate office.
Okay.
If someone has a severe manic phase there, human resources or a manager is going to flag that behavior very quickly. It stands out.
Right, definitely.
But when your office is a high-stakes, crisis-driven pub at 2 a.m., a constant flood of adrenaline and hypervigilance actually works to your advantage.
Wow. So the chaotic environment completely masked his bipolar 1.
Exactly. The industry didn't see a psychological disorder. They just saw extreme professional dedication and unparalleled mental toughness.
So he was essentially being rewarded for his own internal chaos.
Yes, every time he successfully navigated a violent situation, the industry patted him on the back.
But here's the most fascinating part of his whole timeline to me. It wasn't a massive riot or a 50-person bar brawl that finally broke him. After 20 years of surviving absolute chaos, his nervous system completely shattered over a micro-interaction.
Yeah, a customer simply rolled their eyes at him over a flat white coffee.
A completely benign stimulus.
Totally benign.
And yet, that tiny moment of disrespect resulted in a complete psychological collapse. It led to him just walking away, making this foundational declaration: enough violence, enough proving, enough surviving.
From a physiological standpoint, that makes perfect sense. Even if it sounds, irrational on the surface, it's really about the elasticity of the human nervous
I
system.
was trying to picture how this happens. It feels a bit like a high-performance engine,
Yeah,
right?
I like that.
You've got an engine redlining at 8,000 RPMs for 20 years straight. It survives collisions, it survives overheating, it survives all this massive trauma. And then one day, a tiny piece of gravel kicks up from the road, hits the radiator at the exact wrong angle, and the entire engine just violently blows apart.
That is exactly what happens on a biological level. When you spend 35 years of your life constantly assessing threats, your sympathetic nervous system, which is what controls your fight or flight response, it completely loses its ability to regulate down to a calm baseline.
So that elasticity is just gone.
Gone. So when that customer rolled their eyes, his brain didn't process it as a rude coffee drinker. His system processed it with the exact same physiological alarm bells as a flying glass bottle.
Wow.
It highlighted the total collapse of his internal regulatory systems.
So the fists and the intimidation tactics, they're suddenly useless. He can't punch his own nervous system?
Precisely.
Yeah.
He had to build an entirely new internal architecture. And he does this in a very systematic way.
Right. He doesn't just go to therapy and meditate.
No, he merges his street-level reality with serious academic frameworks. He goes out and acquires a global MBA from the University of Newcastle. He trains formally as a crisis counselor. He transitions from being an enforcer to being a strategist.
And this is where the massive output begins. He writes 3 books. They're Still Here, which is a memoir about this exact psychological collapse we just talked about.
Yeah.
There's The Pub, The Punch, and The Path, chronicling his time in London's underbelly. But the 3rd book, Bipolar Aware, is where things get incredibly strategic.
Because that's where he radically reframes his diagnosis.
Yes. The blurb for Bipolar Aware explicitly says this is not a diagnosis, it's a doorway.
I love that phrasing.
Right. He stops looking at bipolar 1 as this lifelong, heavy burden that he needs to medically suppress, and he starts treating it as a highly sensitive operating system, something that can actually be harnessed if you build the right parameters around it.
And this reframing becomes the bedrock for a methodology he develops called conscious systems.
Which is really a direct rejection of what he calls performative strength.
Exactly. If you look at most corporate cultures, there is this toxic, pervasive idea that leaders must be impervious to stress. You have to always be on, always aggressive, always dominating the room.
And Tulloch argues that this performative invulnerability is actually the primary driver of executive burnout. It's a biological liability.
To combat that, the clinical reports show he created some really fascinating tools. There's the comfort zone scale, which helps executives actually quantify their stress limits before they break.
But the one that really stood out to me is a technique he simply calls the pause.
Yes, the pause is brilliant.
It's a tactical cognitive interruption of that fight or flight response right before a decision is made. For anyone listening who has ever, snapped at a coworker or rapidly typed out a stressed out email and hit send before thinking, this is the exact mechanism that prevents that. It creates a gap between stimulus and response.
It's basically a circuit breaker for your nervous system.
But I do have to wonder about the sales pitch here, because performative strength, aggression, intimidation, that is exactly what kept him alive and at the top of the London hospitality food chain for 2 decades.
That's true.
So if he abandons that, isn't that a massive risk? Like, how does a former bouncer walk into a boardroom and sell vulnerability to cutthroat business executives without sounding like he's reading from a cheesy corporate wellness brochure?
It's a really fair question, but his background is actually his biggest asset here. It works because of where he came from, not in spite of it.
Really?
Yeah, he is monetizing radical authenticity. Think about it. If a lifelong academic who has only ever worked in a university tries to teach a stressed-out CEO about the dangers of burnout, it sounds entirely theoretical.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
But when a guy who survived 20 years of Covent Garden knife fights looks you in the eye and tells you that your performative toughness is actually a biological weakness that will eventually kill you, you listen to him.
Wow, yeah, you definitely listen.
He gives these executives the vocabulary to articulate their burnout long before it causes a total operational collapse like his did.
Okay, so that covers the psychological reprogramming.
Yeah.
But how does this translate into actual measurable business success? Because we have financial data here that turns this psychological theory into cold, hard cash.
The Bali project.
Exactly. Having re-engineered his own mind, he takes that exact same structural discipline and applies it to a struggling physical business in Bali.
The venue is called Sunshooters Bar and Grill.
Hmm.
And the execution of this turnaround is just staggering. We are looking at a business infographic he created detailing what he calls 370 days of unpaid work.
Which covers July 2025 to July 2026. And when he says unpaid, he really means it. He drew zero salary for himself.
Nothing.
He maxed out his personal credit cards to fund the venue's growth. The business itself only paid out about 40 million Indonesian rupiah in total wages over that period, which is incredibly lean.
Extremely lean.
But while he was starving himself of a salary, he personally funded a massive AI stack that cost around 36 million rupiah a year.
To give some context for that, 36 million rupiah is roughly $2,500 US dollars. In Bali, that is a very significant financial investment to drop on software subscriptions.
He's paying for Google Workspace Enterprise, Claude Pro, ChatGPT Plus, Gemini Advanced, CapCut Pro for video editing, and fully automated point-of-sale systems. He is layering all of these on top of each other.
And the financial turnaround is undeniable.
Right. Before he implemented this system, the bar was making 820 million rupiah over a 12-month period. After 13 months of this AI integration, revenue hit 2.975 billion rupiah.
That is a 3.63 times revenue increase. Pushing nearly 3 billion rupiah is a massive volume for a local venue.
Huge.
And what's crucial to understand is how he achieved it. He didn't do this by grinding out 18-hour shifts behind the bar. He did it through extreme commercial discipline.
Specifically, this 90-day short-form content calendar he built, which he named Lumindra. Looking at this calendar, the rules are absolutely ruthless.
They really are.
He manages the entire marketing strategy for a multi-million rupiah business in just 18 minutes a morning. He usually does it around 6:40 a.m. while he's having his coffee.
It's all about batching and automation. He films raw, unedited clips on his phone twice a week. That's it.
And the constraints he puts on these videos are so specific. The clips must be under 40 seconds. The visual hook has to happen in the first 2 seconds. And he refuses to vary his call to action.
Ever.
Every single video ends with the exact same sign-off. Message my bar's WhatsApp, the AI will answer you.
I found rule number 8 on his calendar particularly brilliant. Don't check views for 30 days. Volume first, judgment later.
Oh, that's so hard to do.
It is, but he explicitly states that follower count on Instagram or TikTok is a vanity metric. It's irrelevant to him. The only metric that actually matters to his bottom line is the number of WhatsApp messages received per week.
That is his sales funnel.
Exactly. He writes that single number on a whiteboard every Sunday, and that dictates whether the week was a success.
The way he actually utilizes the AI is wild, too. He's not just using it to write generic captions. The sources break down his workflow. He'll feed messy, unstructured customer reviews into Gemini, Advanced to analyze sentiment and plan the whole week's promotions.
Yeah, and he uses ChatGPT to instantly translate his internal staff briefings into perfect Bahasa Indonesia, ensuring nothing is lost in translation with his local team.
But the undisputed crown jewel of this system is his custom WhatsApp bot.
This bot is incredible.
If a customer messages the bar at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, asking if they're showing the Australian Football League the AFL Grand Final that weekend, they don't have to wait for a manager to wake up and reply. The bot reads the query, checks the automated schedule, and answers them in 4 seconds natively in their own language.
Which brings up a really fascinating tension in his whole philosophy.
Yeah, because at first glance, aggressively automating a hospitality business with AI chatbots feels like a complete contradiction of his conscious, human-centric methodology. Hospitality is fundamentally about human connection. It's the warm smile, the handshake, anticipating someone's needs.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to book a table and I'm talking to a robot, isn't that inherently disconnecting?
It absolutely seems contradictory right up until you look closely at the operational reality of running a restaurant or a bar.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, what actually burns out hospitality staff? What causes the toxic gossip and the high turnover? It's the ambiguity. It's the relentless grunt work. Imagine trying to serve a busy dining room on a Friday night, but you constantly have to run to the back office to manually reply to 50 identical WhatsApp messages asking about opening hours or parking.
Oh, right, that's exhausting.
Telex's system uses AI to handle all of that predictable chaos.
I see. So by automating all the mechanical tasks, the
Yeah.
bookings, the translations, the event schedules, he is completely eliminating the friction that causes his staff anxiety.
Exactly. The machine does the machine work, so the humans have the bandwidth to actually do the human work.
Yeah.
If a bartender isn't stressed about checking the venue's phone for late reservations, they can actually look up, make eye contact, and be authentically present with the guest sitting right in front of them. The AI is essentially creating a structural boundary that allows psychological safety and genuine hospitality to exist inside the venue.
Process over personality, I think he called.
Yes. He built a business as a living system that survives and thrives without requiring the owner's constant physical presence or charisma.
Which perfectly sets up how he manages the rest of his life. Because if you were running a nearly 3 billion rupiah business in just 18 minutes a day, you suddenly have a massive amount of free time.
A ton of free time.
This highly efficient system liberated his cognitive bandwidth. And he didn't just take that free time and sit on the beach in Bali. He used it to produce a staggering amount of creative work simultaneously.
This is where we see the ultimate convergence. His psychology, his business acumen, and his art all blend together.
Because under that conscious systems moniker, he goes way beyond writing books. He starts releasing full-length R&B and soul albums. We're looking at titles like Systems of Light and Your Inner Voice.
And if you think this is just some vanity project that a few friends listen to, you'd be wrong.
Definitely. The TuneCore streaming data shows he has reached over 3,800 listeners globally, racking up over 6,000 streams. The data shows it's heavily concentrated in Indonesia, but tracks like The Pub, The Punch, The Path, and Fog to the Fire are getting real traction.
And it's vital to connect the music back to his clinical consulting. These albums aren't just a hobby, they operate as a strategic coaching tool.
Really? How so?
Well, music stimulates the autonomic nervous system directly. It completely bypasses the rational defensive cognitive barriers that a stressed-out corporate executive puts up during a coaching session.
Oh, that's smart.
A client might read his book, then attend one of his workshops on boundary setting, and then listen to his music on the flight home. Every single touch point reinforces this transition from survival mode to conscious presence.
And all of these different threads, the books, the music, the food and beverage community, it all culminated on December 23, 2025.
The triple launch night.
Yes, he hosted an official triple launch night at Sunshooters in Bali. The promotional flyer invites people to experience story, music, community. He successfully merged the launch of the Bipolar Aware book, the Systems of Light album, and his local bar community into a single cohesive event.
It's a brilliant synthesis of his life's work. However, there is a very important distinction to make here.
Okay.
While he blends his art, his history, and his business conceptually, he maintains a strict, unyielding physical separation when it comes to corporate governance and his day-to-day operations.
Yeah, this is a huge point. If you look at the Indonesian KBLI codes, which are the strict national business classification licenses, foreign-owned enterprises are heavily regulated. You cannot legally just mix a rowdy sports bar with a high-end management consulting firm under the same roof without severe regulatory issues.
And beyond the legalities, there's a strict clinical imperative. The Analytical Report on Conscious Systems explicitly states that you cannot coach a high-net-worth executive on trauma, bipolar awareness, and severe executive burnout if they can hear a commercial sports bar broadcasting live rugby through the wall.
Makes sense.
The psychological safety required for his curriculum demands absolute discretion and silence.
So he built literal walls to enforce this. The photographic evidence in our sources shows that the physical operations are entirely separated. Sunshooters Bar Grill has massive, brightly lit street-facing signage to capture all that tourist foot traffic.
Yeah.
But his AI consulting and conscious systems coaching offices, they have entirely separate, highly discrete private entrances. The staff don't mix. The internet servers are completely isolated from one another. The acoustic barriers are absolute.
It is the physical, architectural manifestation of the boundary setting he teaches in his books.
I was looking at the floor plans, and it instantly made me think of a submarine.
A submarine.
Yeah, when you build a submarine, you install these massive steel bulkheads to separate the different compartments.
Oh, that is a perfect structural analogy. Because if one section floods, let's say it's a chaotic late-night Friday shift at the bar, someone drops a tray of glasses, the kitchen is in the weeds, the bulkhead's locked down.
Exactly. The physical separation ensures that the clinical consulting rooms and the music creation environments remain totally dry, totally secure, and completely unaffected by the chaos happening next door.
It's amazing.
He took the internal mental architecture he had to build to survive his own hypervigilant mind, and he literally projected it outward into his corporate real estate.
It is a masterclass in environmental design. He shifted from surviving his environment to consciously designing it.
So if you are listening to this right now and trying to figure out how to apply it to your own life,
Yeah.
well, not ... but you get what I mean. We've traced an unbelievable arc here. A man takes his own trauma. He takes 2 decades of pub scars. He takes his undiagnosed neurodivergence, and instead of
Let's
letting it
get it
crush him
on.
or trying to chemically suppress it into submission, he treats it as a high-sensitivity operating system. He pairs that raw, gritty human insight with 36 million rupiah worth of artificial intelligence, and he builds a self-sustaining ecosystem. Books, R&B albums, and a thriving business that basically runs itself.
And the practical application for all of us is profound. You don't need a global MBA, and you certainly don't need to survive knife fights in Covent Garden to utilize this framework.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. What you can adopt immediately is the architecture. Start implementing the pause to interrupt your own reactivity before you send that email or snap at a partner. And start utilizing AI for just 18 minutes every morning to handle your repetitive, mechanical tasks.
It's really about freeing yourself from what he calls the tyranny of the urgent, because the chaos of life and work is always going to be there. The only question is whether you have the systems in place to keep the bulkheads closed when the water starts rising.
That is the absolute core of conscious systems. You automate the predictable so you can be present for the unpredictable.
Which actually leads to a really fascinating question. We've talked so much today about how Mark's undiagnosed bipolar 1 essentially acted as an untrained, hypersensitive, organic AI.
Yeah, it was processing environmental data, assessing threats, and absorbing stress far too rapidly.
Right, and it eventually burned out his internal infrastructure until he built these conscious systems around it to regulate the flow of data. So, if human cognition can burn out that violently without conscious boundaries, it makes you wonder if artificial intelligence itself might eventually need the digital equivalent of conscious leadership to prevent it from burning out its own infrastructure.
That's a huge thought.
Something to mull over as you build your own systems. Until next time, keep diving deep.